Peace Reflections. Today I just want to make a video about sexuality, giving some detail and some insight into a subject that's probably taboo for a lot of people because they don't want to go into it because society says that it's not right to talk about these things, and we kind of just turn a blind eye to a lot of these subjects that we're bringing to the light. And today I wanted to speak on sexuality, and what it is and what it means and how to perceive sexuality. Sexuality is really how we express some of our innate divine, being of what we are. Some of us log into this realm as male, some of us log into this realm as female. Some of us have masculine energy more than we have feminine energy. Some of us have feminine energy more than we have masculine. And there's all these concepts that are interwoven into what sexuality is displayed as in this reality, in this realm. We have different levels of understanding, from the physical and down to the more metaphysical, the energetics and the perception based on your astrological programming. So the physical would be, we can take the human body and analyze it and look at it and see that it's a male, depending on what body parts it has. It has a penis, it has, scrotum, okay, we have a male on our hands. On the other hand, female, vagina, okay, breast, and that's just the anatomy of the human and how we can come to a conclusion on what the sex of that being is, right? But then we can take it a step further and analyze the astrological programming and the energy that is being broadcast through this human. And some people have more masculine energy and others have more feminine energy. Now, this does not necessarily mean that somebody with feminine energy is a female or someone with masculine energy is a male, because they're interchangeable. And really, we want to be at a balanced part of both of those energies. But furthermore, I wanted to go more into the actual, just the physical, dense part of this topic, talking about sexuality, where people don't want to even acknowledge the basic fundamentals of nature. And when talking about sexuality, things that we can observe, things that we can experience, things that we can really conceptualize easily, because we feel these emotions innately, naturally, without much thought, without trying too hard. It's not difficult to understand these because we just have to listen to our intuition and our desires and what that's driving us towards. Although we live in a society that tells us to suppress these things most of the time, that tells us not to act in accordance with what we feel, because we're supposed to be portraying some sort of divinely God image that is excluded from its natural behavior. And that's especially in the conscious community, I find that a lot, that there's this disconnect between the physical aspect and the spiritual aspect, which to us is one and the same, and we don't suppress our natural desires, our nature, in order to try to bring about higher levels of consciousness. Actually, we integrate. The more we integrate into nature, the more we can bring about higher levels of consciousness, because that is what we are. We are nature. And how can you really be expressing yourself to the fullest if you're suppressing some part of your nature? And this is the disconnect that's going on in the conscious community, and a lot of these gurus and people who are suppressed sexually, thinking that they're reaching higher levels of consciousness, but they lacking understanding of what they really are, because in that transgression of trying to become more conscious, they lose a part of themselves which makes them conscious, which is the natural aspect, the intuition, and just the innateness that comes as being a human on this planet. So when we're talking about sexuality, people can't really contemplate or understand, with being objective. They're so subjected to all these other paradigms and ways of thinking, because they've been programmed to think this way, think that sexualizing the body, just over sexualizing the body, hyper sexualizing the body, and acting out of that instead of really analyzing it for what it really is. And then we see these interactions between humans, right? You see women, like men trying to talk to women, spitting game or whatever they call it in this modern day and age. But it's all a reflection of really what's going on in the whole animal kingdom as well. Like you have all these mating calls and these rituals that these different species go through in order to have this process of mating going on and to procreate and reproduce. And in the same fashion, we can see reflections of that in the human species, yet we still try to suppress a lot of that. And we've even, because of our lack of understanding, we've taken it to points that it never really needed to get taken to. Like now we live in a society that tells you need to, talk to a girl. You need to, if you're a man, and you're trying to talk to a girl, you need to take her on a date. You need to wait a certain amount of time. You need to call her. You need to play a game that is gonna eventually down the line get you to what is ultimately the end goal for every species. Yet we play this game because of society and the programming that we have that tells us we need to act a certain way and play a certain card that's dealt to us. But in reality, every species in the animal kingdom is really direct and to the point because it's living in understanding with its nature. It's not going against its nature. Yet the humans are the only ones that can really operate out of that set programming because we're conscious. We're conscious of and aware of ourselves. So we've come to a place now where we're so disconnected from our nature in as far as sexuality goes because we don't really understand ourselves and we make sexuality taboo. We're covered up most of the time. We're not in our natural skin suit, in our natural clothing, which is our skin. So when we encounter somebody who is in their natural clothing, their skin, we sexualize it, we hypersexualize it, and we turn it into a sexual encounter when it's not really that, because the sexual encounter is more about the intention that goes behind being in your skin suit rather than just being in your skin suit. Like, is a dog sexually interested in another dog just because they're both not wearing clothes like they always are? It's not that. It's not until there's the dog's in heat and then they start having this intention to procreate is when it becomes a sexual act, really. But we can't really grasp that because we're always covering up our bodies so that in the moment that we are exposed or we feel exposed, we interpret it as a sexual act when that's not even the way it really is. So there's a disconnect between that already, and there's this unspoken conversation that nobody's having yet that we all go through in our head, that everybody's thinking about but nobody wants to talk about it because it's become a taboo subject on sexuality and speaking on human to human interactions as far as sexual interactions. But it's time that we talk about this and we analyze and observe our nature so that we can gain a better understanding of what we are and that we can live in harmony and we can live in accordance to what we are. It's difficult living in a society that tries to suppress that and then wanting to uncover these hidden knowledge and these hidden jewels of information, because you will be ostracized just by speaking on topics that are considered taboo in Babylon. But the reality is, if we want to reconnect with ourselves, we want to reconnect with nature, which is what we really are, then we must study and understand what we are and embrace that nature that we are. So sexuality is a sensitive topic, but we must address it in the most objective manner possible. So when talking about sexuality, we have so many different, especially nowadays, classifications for these different preferences, sexual preferences. You have straight, homosexual, heterosexual, you have transsexuals, you have bisexual, and lesbians, gay, whatever, all these different categories for these sexual preferences. but in reality there's only really one way to procreate and reproduce and create life, which is the heterosexual way, as far as humans go. So everything else is really not um it's more of a just an it is a preference, but it's not intended to be a lifelong commitment. So you can have acts that are homosexual, you can have people women on women, men on men, but never was that intended to be the structure of a unit, of a family unit, or of a household, a so-called household, was just the family unit and how it interacts in a tribal setting. But it was never intended to be of that order. So we must understand that although you can have those actions and have these acts and play these acts out, that is not the way that it was structured to be, because it doesn't align with or correlate with natural law. It doesn't ensure the the survival of a species, of the human species, because it's not really productive to, it's not productive to the reproduction and procreation. So we here at Melanation, we're not opposed to homosexual acts, but we don't condone homosexual lifelong partnerships unless it's a bisexual, and then there's still a woman involved, and there's procreation happening, and there's this building of a nation, which we encourage, especially for beings who are conscious. So we must really understand it from this perspective, and think objectively. And a lot of beings out there who do have homosexual acts and are tapped into that side of them, and do like to express that. We have nothing against you. We have nothing against that. We just want you to think objectively and understand that at the end of the day, you have to be conscious enough to know that if you wanted to build a nation, you would have to procreate with the opposite sex, so that you can reproduce and assure that that nation expands, and that your knowledge and level of consciousness is passed down to your descendants. So we must think objectively from that perspective and understand that from that point. And there's so many things to talk about as when it comes to sexuality, that because the topic has been sparsely even talked about in modern day culture. It's been suppressed, but we need to understand the body parts and how they work, the physical anatomy of a man, the physical of anatomy of a woman, and why she has breasts, and why she's actually, how she actually brings life and channels, portals life into this reality. And then not only that, but has the capacity and ability and the desire to nurture and and build life into this reality, and that's a crazy, amazing concept that we need to understand and respect for the woman. And women need to understand what they are, and really embrace what they are, so that they can tap into that potential of what they are, and be able to understand that how amazing it is and how sacred your body must be for you to be able to portal another human through you into this reality, and then be able to nurture that human and give it life, and and sustain its life. And then must understand their bodies and their physical characteristics, and analyze their anatomy, and be able to come to the realization that they're the seed bearers, that they hold this genetic material within in them, to be able to go around the world and spread their seed to as many women as possible, as they have the capacity to. Really, not all men have the capacity to do to many women, but those that do, and that it naturally falls in order that they will, and they have that desire already, and that's already a reality. But then they come into this Babylon world, and they get told not to do that. So we live in a world where men are being suppressed of their nature. They're being suppressed of their innate natural desires to want to plant their seeds, and it gets even criminalized, and you can get into so much trouble just trying to express your human nature in this Babylon civilization. That's one of the issues that we have with it, is that we can't be ourselves truly. So what kind of world would you want? Why would you want to live in a world that doesn't allow you to be yourself fully? And for men especially, there's so much suppression going on as far as their desires, what they want naturally. And it's crazy to live in a reality with so many men are suppressing their human nature, and then you see it fall through the cracks. You see it seeping through still, just permeating through the fabric of Babylon. Still a conscious reminder for us. You have side girls and side men, and you have all these hidden relationships going on, trying to express the nature of what we are. Um, but it's still seeping through still. Even in this society, we just demonize it, and we look down on it, but still, we see the reality of it at the end of the day. So even though we try to hide from it and run from it and suppress it, it still creeps to the surface, because nature will always prevail. Nature is always going to come out on top. It's always going to be here regardless of what we try to do as humans, try to manipulate and change and suppress. At the end of the day, it still comes out on top. So we don't believe in suppressing that. We don't believe in stagnating that flow of energy. We allow energy to flow how it must flow, in the path of least resistance. That's why we observe nature and we understand it, and we observe ourselves and we understand ourselves through observing our astrological programming. So your natal chart, which is your natal chart, get that done if you haven't got that done, so you can understand yourself. But then we go further and analyze nature, and just on a more, surface level, that is easy to understand just by observing the bees and the birds and the animals in the animal kingdom, and then observing ourselves in our natural environment, and just kind of tuning into what we gravitate towards naturally. We've been able to observe and analyze and come to the realization that we are what we are, and that must not be suppressed, that must be embraced. We must make room for this energy to flow. We must make room for this expression of consciousness to move through this realm without without any form of stagnation or any form of resistance, because that's what Babylon is. Babylon is just resistance. That's why they have to cut the weeds on the side of the road every week, because nature keeps coming back. And there's so much resistance in building this civilization that people don't even realize. And building Babylon is resistance against nature, literally. That's all it is. It's putting up, concrete on top of grass that used to be there. It's, knocking down mountains. It's just like the path of most resistance. It's doing the most. And what we here at Melanation, we take the path of least resistance. That's why we understand and live by natural law, because that's already here, and that's already what's been, been programmed into this reality. So we choose to follow that and my outlaw and natural law, and we observe that and we abide by it, so as to take the path of least resistance. And in doing so, we discover that we have innate qualities within us as men, as women, as a species, that we should abide by if we are to live in harmony with nature. The more we deviate from that, the more we become something that we don't recognize, that we don't know ourselves. We misunderstand ourselves, and thus we hate ourselves, because hate is misunderstanding, love is understanding. And if you love yourself, that means you understand yourself, that means you know yourself, you're conscious and aware of what you are. And that's true love. That's really loving yourself, not this romanticized ideals of romance and all these things that you think about when you think of love. Real love is understanding, is being able to be aware of what you are, being conscious of something, knowing it. That's what real love is. So if we are to love ourselves, we must understand ourselves, and in order to do that, we must study ourselves. you know, and study our true nature so that we can live in tune with it instead of trying to going against it, going against the grain consistently 24/7, putting up so much energy when we already have a path that's been set forth by nature. So even that can be applied to any facet, any area of life, really. But to focus it on and on this topic is of sexuality is just a simple analysis of the human anatomy and a simple analysis of what's best as far as the the continuation of a species, which would go in accordance with natural laws. So we just analyze our bodies and we can see that, you know, how the male is designed, how the woman is designed, what our natural desires are, how our anatomy is, and then we can go from there and really, develop a blueprint for what nature had intended for us. And that is for the man to spread a seed and the woman to birth life into this existence and to nurse and nurture. And the man, that's why, men are naturally, they're more built, they have more muscle naturally without really trying, But now we live in a society where women are trying to compete. Women are going to the gym, trying to lift weights, taking all these proteins, taking all these steroids to try to go against nature, basically to try to become like men, because they live in a society that tells them that they can be men, that they don't need men, that they're taken care of without men, that they're good, they're straight without men. But the reality is that they're still, at the end of the day, they're being subject to a man that's behind the scenes, that they don't really even realize it, but they're serving a hidden master. But they're given the impression that they're single, that they don't need a man. But really, who provides the food for them? Who provides the shelter for them? Who provides them their job? Who provides them their resources? Who gives them the opportunity to feel like they're independent? And there's somebody behind that. There's a system behind that lets them feel independent. So, but if you took away that system, if you took away all that, and if you disappeared Babylon out of existence, they would automatically, innately know that they need a counterpart. They need a male to provide and protect for them, because they don't have the strength. They don't have the same characteristics that a man has. Just like a man doesn't have the same characteristics that a woman has. He can't portal life into this reality. He can't nurse and nurture life like a woman can. If a woman has a child, she can literally sustain that child off of her body alone. A man can't do that. A man can't, doesn't have the capacity to breastfeed a child, And until we learn to respect and honor this reality, the anatomy of each gender, then we're not really gonna be able to live in harmony with ourselves, because we're gonna constantly be having men who are trying to be like women, and then women who are trying to be like men, and living in this insane reality, thinking that we can go against our nature and that we can just reverse the roles so simply, when we've been designed to live in accordance with our anatomy. So look at this amount of resistance, taking steroids, taking pills, taking all this, going to the gym, working out, getting sexual transplants, getting sexual operations to sex changes, Look how much resistance is being put up to go against nature. That's the insane world that Babylon lives in, is putting up so much resistance when we have a perfect blueprint set out already that we can live and abide by and honor and respect. But that's lower self. That's how the lower self thinks. The lower self lives in that world of insanity of putting up resistance and doing the most to try to go against what it really is. When you come to your higher self, you're gonna want to live in harmony and in peace with nature. And in doing so, you're gonna take the path of least resistance. You're gonna obey nature. You're gonna live by nature, and you're gonna understand yourself. You're gonna understand and love yourself. Love is understanding. So it's just about tuning into what you really are, looking in the mirror, feeling yourself. Why am I more muscular than women? Why do I have more muscles? Why am I more built than my female counterpart? You know, why do I have this piece of technology on my body? And then women, you know, feeling themselves and observing themselves and asking the same questions, ultimately, why? And this questions will take you on a quest to discover what you really are. And in doing so, if you are enlightened, filled with the light, filled with the truth, you will want to live by it, and you will want to obey nature and obey and live in harmony with it. So that's just the video I wanted to make today. You know, I urging everybody to just observe themselves and observe their nature, and really look out, you know, go into nature, because nature is just going to mirror you. It's going to reflect back to you what you really are. That's why nature is so powerful, so beautiful, and for a lot of people it's so scary, because it reflects back to them what they really are. You go out in nature, you're going to discover what you really are. You're going to know if you're a man or not. You're going to know if you're a woman or not. You're going to know what you were put on this planet to do, you know. And that's why it's so important to go out in nature, because Babylon gives you the illusion, the possibility to be going against yourself, you know, to be resisting that natural flow of life. But in nature, it's automatic, you know, it's on autopilot. There's a program set already for you to live by and understand what you are, and there's no escaping it when you're out in nature. You know, it's only when you come into Babylon's civilization, society, that you even have that possibility. So go out into nature, observe yourself, you know, study yourself, know yourself, so that you can love yourself, and that you could project, you know, a true reality into this reality that you're experiencing. All right, peace reflections. I love myself.